Mexico is one of those places that completely rewrites itself in your mind once you actually go there. Whatever you think you know about this country, I promise you, the reality is 1,000 times more vivid, more complex, more breathtaking than anything you've seen in a photograph or read in a travel blog. And today I want to take you on a journey through some of the most extraordinary places this country has to offer. Places that will make you question why you ever thought your bucket list was complete without them. But before we dive in, let me tell you something that surprised me. Mexico is the 6th most visited country on the entire planet. 6th. Out of nearly 200 nations on Earth, Mexico consistently draws tens of millions of visitors every single year. And when you start to understand why, when you start to peel back the layers of what this country actually contains, you realize that number might even be too low. Because Mexico is not one destination. It is dozens of destinations packed into a single nation, each one radically different from the last. So let me take you there. And I want to start with something that most people overlook completely when they think about Mexico: the geography. People hear Mexico and they think beaches. They think Cancun. They think resort towns and margaritas by the pool. And look, those things exist, and they are wonderful. But Mexico's geography is staggeringly diverse. We are talking about a country that contains deserts, tropical rainforests, volcanic mountain ranges, deep canyon systems, coastal mangroves, alpine forests, and underground river networks that stretch for hundreds of miles beneath the surface of the Yucatan Peninsula. This is a country where you can stand on a snow-capped volcano in the morning and be swimming in the Caribbean Sea by the afternoon. Let us start in a place that embodies this geographic wonder like almost nowhere else on Earth: the Copper Canyon, or Barrancas del Cobre, in the Sierra Madre Occidental of northwestern Mexico. Now, most people have heard of the Grand Canyon in Arizona. It is one of the most famous natural landmarks on the planet. What most people do not know is that the Copper Canyon system is actually larger. It is a network of 6 interconnected canyons, and in some places, it is deeper than the Grand Canyon itself. The sheer scale of this place is almost impossible to comprehend until you are standing on the edge of one of its ridges, looking down into a chasm that seems to have no bottom. And here's where it gets even more incredible. There is a railway that runs through this canyon system. It is called the Chepe, and it is one of the most spectacular train journeys in the world. The track passes through 86 tunnels and crosses 37 bridges as it winds through this impossible landscape. Imagine sitting in a train car, a cup of coffee in your hand, watching as the world drops away on either side of you into these vast, green, mist-filled gorges. It is the kind of experience that stays with you for the rest of your life. And the people who call this canyon home, the Raramuri or Tarahumara, are just as remarkable as the landscape. They are known as some of the greatest long-distance runners in human history. They have lived in these canyons for centuries, running along paths that would terrify most professional athletes, covering distances that would put marathon runners to shame. Their culture, their resilience, their connection to this land is something that you feel when you visit. It is woven into the very air of the place. Now let us shift dramatically. Let us go from the vast open canyons of the north to one of the most magical underground worlds you will ever encounter: the cenotes of the Yucatan Peninsula. If you have never heard of cenotes, prepare to have your mind blown. Cenotes are natural sinkholes formed by the collapse of limestone bedrock, which exposes the groundwater underneath. The Yucatan is riddled with them. There are estimated to be more than 6,000 cenotes scattered across the peninsula, and many of them are connected by a vast underground river system that is one of the longest in the world. Some cenotes are completely open to the sky, creating these perfect circular pools of impossibly clear turquoise water surrounded by jungle. Others are partially enclosed, with tree roots dangling down from above like nature's own chandeliers, sunlight streaming through gaps in the rock and hitting the water in these ethereal columns of light. And then there are the fully underground cenotes, cathedral-like caverns where stalactites hang from the ceiling, and the water is so clear that you can see every detail of the rock formations 30 feet below the surface. The ancient Maya considered cenotes to be sacred. They believed these pools were entrances to Xibalba, the underworld. They performed ceremonies at these sites, made offerings, and treated them as some of the most spiritually significant places in their civilization. When you swim in a cenote, when you float in that cool, crystal-clear water and look up at the rock and the roots and the light, you understand why. There is something about these places that feels genuinely otherworldly, like you have stepped through a portal into some place that does not quite belong to the modern world. And speaking of the ancient Maya, we absolutely have to talk about the archaeological sites, because Mexico is home to some of the most significant and awe-inspiring ruins of ancient civilizations anywhere on the planet. Let us begin with the one everyone knows, Chichen Itza. The Great Pyramid of Kukulkan, also known as El Castillo, rises from the flat jungle landscape of the Yucatan like something out of a dream. It is a masterpiece of ancient engineering and astronomical knowledge. The pyramid has 365 steps, one for each day of the solar year. And twice a year, during the spring and autumn equinoxes, the setting sun casts a shadow on the northern staircase that creates the illusion of a serpent slithering down the side of the pyramid. The ancient builders designed this effect intentionally. They understood the movements of the sun with such precision that they could engineer a shadow play that would only appear on 2 specific days of the year. That is not just architecture. That is genius. But here's what I want you to know. Chichen Itza, as extraordinary as it is just the beginning. Mexico has hundreds of archaeological sites, and some of the lesser-known ones are even more impressive in certain ways. Take Palenque, for example. Deep in the jungle of Chiapas, the ruins of Palenque rise from the forest floor like a lost city in a movie. The setting alone is extraordinary. Thick tropical forest surrounds the site on all sides, and the sounds of howler monkeys and tropical birds fill the air. The architecture here is some of the finest the Maya ever produced. The Temple of the Inscriptions contains one of the most important archaeological discoveries in the Americas, the tomb of the ruler Pakal, who was buried in an elaborate sarcophagus deep within the pyramid. The carved lid of that sarcophagus is one of the most iconic images in all of Mesoamerican art. And then there is Teotihuacan. This is not a Maya site. This city was built by a civilization whose very name we do not even know for certain. They left no written records that we have been able to decipher. But what they left behind is staggering. The Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan is the 3rd largest pyramid in the world. The Avenue of the Dead, the main thoroughfare of the ancient city, stretches for nearly 2.5 miles. At its peak, Teotihuacan was one of the largest cities in the world, with a population that may have reached 200,000 people. This was happening at the same time the Roman Empire was at its height. 200,000 people living in a meticulously planned city with apartment complexes, temples, marketplaces, and murals that still retain their color after nearly 2,000 years. When you climb the Pyramid of the Sun, when you stand at the top and look out over this ancient metropolis with the Pyramid of the Moon in the distance and the mountains ringing the horizon, you feel the weight of time in a way that is hard to describe. You are standing where hundreds of thousands of people lived and worked and worshipped and died, and we do not even know what they called themselves. There is something profoundly humbling about that. Now, I have been talking a lot about nature and history, but Mexico is equally astonishing when it comes to its living culture. And there is no better place to experience that than in its cities. Let me take you to Mexico City, the capital, one of the largest metropolitan areas on Earth, with over 21 million people in the greater urban area. And let me tell you, this city is absolutely electric. The energy here is unlike anything I have experienced anywhere else in the world. Start in the historic center, the Zócalo. This is one of the largest public squares on the planet, and it sits directly on top of what was once the center of the Aztec capital, Tenochtitlan. Right next to the square, you can visit the Templo Mayor, the excavated remains of the great Aztec temple that once dominated this area. So you are literally standing in a modern megacity, looking at the foundations of the civilization that was here before the Spanish arrived in the 16th century. Layers upon layers of history, stacked on top of each other like pages in a book. But Mexico City is not just about history. It is one of the great cultural capitals of the world right now, in the present tense. The food scene alone is worth the trip. This is a city that has everything from street vendors selling the most incredible tacos you have ever tasted for a couple of dollars to world-class restaurants that rank among the best on the planet. Pujol, one of the most celebrated restaurants in the world, is here. But honestly, some of the most memorable meals you will ever have in Mexico City will come from a cart on a sidewalk at 11 o'clock at night. A taco al pastor with pineapple and cilantro and a squeeze of lime, eaten standing up under a fluorescent light, might be the single greatest food experience of your life. I am not exaggerating. The museums are world-class too. The National Museum of Anthropology is one of the finest museums of its kind anywhere. It houses an extraordinary collection of artifacts from Mexico's pre-Columbian civilizations, including the famous sunstone, that massive carved disc that is one of the most recognizable symbols of Mexican culture. You could spend an entire day in this museum and still not see everything. And then there is the art. Mexico has produced some of the most important artists of the 20th century. Diego Rivera, Frida Kahlo, David Alfaro Siqueiros, José Clemente Orozco. The muralism movement that these artists pioneered changed the course of art history. You can see Rivera's murals in the National Palace, right on the Zócalo, where he painted epic scenes depicting the entire history of Mexico, from ancient times to the modern era. These are not paintings in a gallery. These are enormous works covering entire walls and stairwells, telling the story of a nation with passion and fury and tenderness. Frida Kahlo's Blue House, the Casa Azul in the Coyoacán neighborhood, is one of the most visited museums in the city. Walking through the rooms where she lived and worked, seeing her personal belongings, her paintings, the garden where she spent her final years, it is an intimate and deeply moving experience. You come away understanding not just Kahlo the artist, but Kahlo the human being, in all her complexity and pain and brilliance. Now let us leave the capital and head south to Oaxaca. If Mexico City is the heart of the country, Oaxaca is its soul. This is a place where indigenous traditions are not relics of the past. They are living, breathing parts of everyday life. The state of Oaxaca is home to 16 distinct indigenous groups, each with their own language, traditions, customs, and artistic practices. The cultural richness here is almost overwhelming. The food in Oaxaca deserves its own episode. This region is famous for its moles, those incredibly complex sauces made from dozens of ingredients, including various chili peppers, chocolate, nuts, spices, and herbs. There are 7 classic moles of Oaxaca, and each one is a masterpiece of flavor. The Negro, the Rojo, the Amarillo, each one tells a different story on your palate. The mezcal here is legendary too. Oaxaca is the heartland of mezcal production, and visiting a small family-run palenque where they produce mezcal using methods that have not changed in centuries is one of those experiences that connects you to something ancient and real. And then there is the Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos. If you time your visit to Oaxaca for late October and early November, you will witness one of the most extraordinary cultural celebrations on Earth. This is not a morbid holiday. It is a joyful, colorful, deeply meaningful celebration of life and memory. Families build elaborate altars called ofrendas in their homes, decorated with marigolds, candles, photographs, and the favorite foods and drinks of their departed loved ones. They visit cemeteries and spend the night there, picnicking and playing music and telling stories about those who have passed. The streets come alive with parades, music, dancing, and incredible costumes and face paint. There is a profound philosophy embedded in this tradition. It is the idea that death is not an ending, but a continuation, that our loved ones are never truly gone as long as we remember them. Participating in the Day of the Dead, even as a visitor, even as an outsider, gives you a perspective on mortality and memory that stays with you. It changes the way you think about loss. It changes the way you think about what it means to honor the people you have loved. Let me take you to one more place, the coast. Because yes, the beaches of Mexico absolutely deserve their reputation, but I want to go beyond the obvious. Everyone knows Cancun and the Riviera Maya. These are beautiful places, no question. The Caribbean coast of Mexico has some of the most stunning beaches in the world, with that signature turquoise water and white sand that looks like powdered sugar. But let me point you somewhere that fewer people know about: the Pacific coast of Oaxaca. Specifically, a stretch of coastline that includes places like Mazunte, Zipolite, and Puerto Escondido. This is where the surfers go. Puerto Escondido has one of the most powerful beach breaks in the world, a wave called the Mexican Pipeline that attracts professional surfers from every corner of the globe. But even if you are not a surfer, this coastline is magical. Small beach towns with a laid-back vibe, incredible seafood, dramatic sunsets over the Pacific, and a sense of being somewhere that has not yet been consumed by mass tourism. And then there is the Baja California Peninsula. This is an entirely different Mexico. The peninsula stretches for nearly 800 miles south from the California border, separating the Pacific Ocean from the Sea of Cortez. Jacques Cousteau once called the Sea of Cortez the world's aquarium, and he was not exaggerating. The marine biodiversity here is extraordinary. Whale sharks, manta rays, sea lions, dolphins, humpback whales, hammerhead sharks. The snorkeling and diving in the Sea of Cortez is some of the best on the planet, and the desert landscapes of Baja are hauntingly beautiful. Giant cardan cacti, the largest cacti in the world, stand like sentinels across the arid terrain. The contrast between the harsh, sun-baked desert and the teeming life of the sea just a few hundred yards away is one of those things that makes you appreciate the sheer range of what this planet can produce.